to serve as the chair for EQB. And why don't we go over to our Executive Director, Catherine, who will call the roll.
All right. Thank you, Chair. All right. Commissioner Arnold is not with us.
Jamie McAllister for Commissioner Arnold.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Board Member Bakken.
Present.
All right. Board Member Bauer-Kemper. I believe he is planning to join us at about 2 p.m. So we'll be expecting him shortly. Board Member Brandt.
Present.
Commissioner Cunningham. I believe we're expecting Commissioner Cunningham at about 1:30. Okay. Thank you. Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you.
Chair Daubenberger.
Here.
Commissioner Gronball. Board Member Hint. Chair Holman.
Yes.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Here, but I don't know if you can hear me.
We can, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Kessler's not with us. We have Deputy Commissioner Peter Chester. Thank you. Board Member Martin. Commissioner Verla could not join us. Do we have Deputy Commissioner McKinnon? Board Member Nelson?
Present.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Board Member Smith?
Present.
Okay. Commissioner Stroman couldn't join us, but I believe we have Melissa Kuski on. And I believe Chair Zelli from that council couldn't join us. Do we have Peter Lindstrom? All right, well, Madam Chair, we have 8 people at the moment. Our quorum is 9, but as I said, we are expecting 2 more in the next 20 minutes to an hour.
Right.
So
Thank you for calling the roll. So the next item would be the approval of the consent agenda. But we do not have a quorum yet, so I think we will then come back to that. Once we have a quorum, we can come back to approving the consent agenda. So why don't we then move on to the next item, which would be the Executive Director's report. So, Director, you want to take it again from here?
all right, well, thank you, Chair Daubenberger, and thanks everyone for joining us here on, sorry, I'm going to say it, State Fair Eve. I'm excited to see all of you. It's nice to have folks here in person. Logistics, as you all know, the meeting is being recorded. If you are online, our meeting chat is open and visible to everybody, but the chat is not kept as part of the meeting records, so you should only use it for logistical issues such as identifying can't hear us, or if you would like to make a comment but not actually put your comment in there, you would take that orally. Board members, we welcome all your questions and feedback today. If you're online, feel free to use the raise hand function. And if you're here, I guess just wave. It's been a long time since we've had this many of you in this one room. So I guess just raise your hand for questions and feedback. For members of the public, we are going to have multiple opportunities to give input to the board today on our 3 main items. The Energy Rulemaking Project Update, the Groundwater Policy Report, and approval of the work plan. And then at the end of the meeting, we will have time for any general comments. I will note we do have some invited guests from a student youth program that we worked with this summer. They will be coming and they are on the agenda for I think about 2:45. So we do want to make sure they have time to speak. I don't know that they need the whole time they've been allotted, but we might circle back, may have to circle back to some agenda items to accommodate their schedule. So just be warned. So also we do want to encourage people, if they're making comments, to be succinct and focused. Am I hearing an echo? Okay, all right, I'm sorry. So we'll cue commenters at relevant points in the agenda. If you're online, here's your way to speak. If you're in the room, you can sign up on the sign-up sheet that was outside. And all of that information is in our packet as well. So those are our public comment procedures and guidelines. We're looking forward to hearing from you. All right, moving on to past logistics. Not tomorrow, but next Thursday, the 28th, you can come and see us and some partners from the Interagency Pollinator Protection Team at the Eco Experience for Pollinator Day at the State Fair. And then on September 6th, we will be out at the Lake Nokomis Monarch Festival. We have butterfly tattoos and seed packets and pins and a quiz to test your knowledge on bees and pollinators. After giving the quiz multiple times last year, I'm very proud to say that my ability to identify different bees has gone from non-existent to minimal. So you could all come and learn some of that as well. For our meetings, just an update, September often would be scheduled as an ARIS meeting, but because of our schedule and some items that we need to move forward, we are going to have a full board meeting next month. We are going to be planning to ask for formal approval to move the energy rules forward, depending on the outcome of today's discussion, and then talk about the climate action framework and some of the ongoing work around climate. If you have anything specific that you would like to hear about the climate action framework, you can let me know, board members, and I will pass that on to PCA, who will be the main presenters for that item. And then October, we hope to have everybody in person, and we'll be having lunch for that meeting. Project updates, we're continuing to move forward. A lot of the things we're working on, including the gas production rules. Jesse isn't here today. He's out at a conference learning about hydrogen. So hopefully he's taking away some good stuff from that. One last note about data centers. Data centers and the appropriate environmental review of data centers is an emerging issue that we're increasingly hearing more about. And one concern in particular is the use of the AUAR process to review the data centers and whether that's resulting in sufficient information. So you do have a public comment in your packet about that issue. Also note that there have recently been a couple of lawsuits filed on some specific AUARs that appear to contain data centers. So just a note on that as an issue that I think should stay on our radar and that we're likely to hear more about in the future. And I think you'll probably hear a little bit more about later today as well. And with that, Chair Daubenberger, that's my update.
Thank you. Nuschler, or do any of the board members have any questions for Executive Director Nuschler on her update? Any in the room? Not seeing anything online. Then we can go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. That is the Energy Rulemaking Project update. And our presenter is Colleen Hetzel, who's the Director of Environmental Review Program for the EQB. And I will just, as kind of a reminder to what Catherine just said, we are going to have a little bit of a public comment period for just this item at the end of it too. So consider that as for those out there in the public who might wish to comment. And with that, I'll turn it over to welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. As the Chair mentioned, my name is Colleen Hetzel, and I will be talking to you about the energy infrastructure rulemaking process that we've been talking about at the last few meetings. Today, my goal is that we will have an option to move forward so that in September, we can talk about voting on or approving the draft language and moving that on to the notice so that we can make sure that our rule is conforming with the statute that passed in 2024. Just a reminder, this is a conforming process. We are matching the statute that has already been passed. It's Minnesota Statute 216I, and it talks about, sorry, I'm just going to go forward a little bit. It talks about some of these energy projects that you've heard a lot about. It's a lot of the larger energy projects that PUC has been reviewing for a very long time, and it has moved those into Minnesota Statute 216I and laid out the process. And so now our rule needs to match what is in 216I. So as you can see, it's things like high voltage transmission lines, large electric power generating plants, energy storage systems, solar generating, and we go back. So these are some of the different areas where our rule no longer conforms with the statute. Our definitions are now out of date, as well as some of our mandatory categories don't quite align, both in the EAW and the EIS area. And then there are some places where we have references to statutes or other rules that have been replaced because that language was moved from those older statutes, rules and placed into 269 to consolidate all of them. So those are the places that will need to be conformed that we're working on moving forward in this rulemaking process. So the first option that I'm going to talk a little bit about, and we talked about this in the areas meeting as well, if you were able to attend that, is called, I'm going to call it a parallel process. And this is actually not the option that we would recommend moving forward. In the past, this is how we would have liked to conform. And basically the parallel option is that we would take the projects that are found within 216I, and we would just place those within our mandatory categories as separate projects. In the past, that's been very helpful. People know where to come to find projects for environmental review in our rules, and it's been really easy to just kind of place those within there. But I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're not going to suggest that this is the option that we're moving forward. So just as a more visual way to explain this, this is, you don't have to read it. This is from our rule, Minnesota Rule 4410, and where you see these blue lines, where it says C and D, those are existing projects that are within the rules, and those no longer conform. Those are outdated. They reference things that have been repealed and been replaced with 269. So in this parallel version, what we would do is we would update those to reflect references that are now relevant in 216I. And then where you see the green arrow at the end, we would add in those additional projects that are called out in 216I that are not currently in our rule. But the reason that this doesn't actually work and why it's been done in the past and been very successful is because the way that 216I was drafted, basically it says all of those types of energy projects that I showed you on a previous slide will undergo environmental review as an EIS. But then it slowly says, unless it hits this type of project or this threshold, and the thresholds are called out in definitions as opposed to different project types. So there's not an easy way to take projects and place them into the Minnesota Rule 4410 the way that we've done it in the past. There would have to be a lot of separation and teasing out of very specific things that kind of still will cross an EAW and an EIS. And then also mentioning that these projects, the majority of them will not undergo an EAW. They will undergo what's called an environmental assessment that PUC has been using for a very long time. So they don't really naturally fit within the EAW mandatory category area anyway. So we started the process hoping that this is the way that we could do it, to make it very easy and user-friendly. But the more that we did it, we realized that we were creating situations where it's very difficult to figure out and call out those different projects and really put them in the right location. So here are some of the pros to this method if we were to do what we're calling the parallel method or parallel option. It would be something where the user would naturally go to look for the types of projects that would undergo environmental review. A lot of people are very familiar with Minnesota Rule 4410 and knowing that they can go there to see if their project should move forward with environmental review. So if we did this, it would be calling out all of those projects, or at least attempting to very clearly call out all of those projects. Some of those cons, like I mentioned, is that it doesn't highlight that a lot of them are actually not going through an EAW. They are going through this alternative process called an environmental assessment that PUC uses that the statute outlines. And then there could be a lot of duplication in areas because of the way that I mentioned that it's written where it says projects undergo an EIS unless You would have to put everything into the EIS category, but then most of them won't actually undergo an EIS. So they're going to have to be in multiple locations, and it would be very hard for you to really determine which environmental review they should be undergoing without going back to 269 to really figure that out anyway. So the next option I'm going to go through is the one that we are recommending we move forward with. And we're calling this one the clearinghouse option. And this is where, unlike in the past, where we put all of the information within the mandatory category sections on the type of project that's undergoing environmental review, we would be straying from that. And we would have one new part that we're adding into the Minnesota Rule 4410 that basically says, if you are looking for these types of projects to try to determine if you need to undergo, what type of environmental review you need to undergo, we're going to point them back to 216I to get that information so that they can follow how it's outlined in 216I to really determine where their project should fit for environmental review. If you were to select this opt-in, we'll work with the revisor's office to determine where it best fits within the rule, but we are proposing right now that it would go in the substitute forms of environmental review section. We feel like this also highlights that a lot of these projects don't actually undergo an EAW, but they are doing that environmental review instead. So we feel like it also highlights that and lets people know that it is different than the EAW mandatory category area that you would find under 4410, 4300. This is a draft of what that language could be. We have been working with PUC to try to make sure that we're covering all the bases that they also see as a priority for conforming this rule. And one of the things we think is really important is to call out those types of projects very specifically so that people see those types of projects right away. So while the terminology within Minnesota Statute 216I uses large energy infrastructure facility, to be user-friendly and try to go back to the way that EQB has done it in the past to really highlight project types, we are making a point to call out those different types of projects that are defined in 216I as a large energy infrastructure facility. So we're calling out that an energy storage is one of those projects, high voltage transmission line, to really, again, make it as user-friendly as possible. And one other thing that we have been working with PUC on is that while these projects would not show up as their own separate area within the mandatory category section of our rule, we would put what we're calling like a flag to let the user know that typically when you came here, you would expect to see things for high voltage transmission lines or electric generating facilities. So at the beginning of the parts for both the mandatory category for an EAW and the mandatory category areas for an EIS. We'll put up in the very header part of those that just if you're coming here for energy projects, you used to find some of them here. Now go to Minnesota Rule or Minnesota Statute 216I to find that information. So it would not only just be in that new part, but because we know that people came through our rule looking for these types of projects in the past, also making a call out for it within the mandatory category section. Not project by project, but just a quick call out at the very beginning that shows that this is something that is now housed in Minnesota Statute 216I. So we think this one has far more pros than cons. And some of those are the fact that we're highlighting that these projects now undergo that EA environmental assessment as opposed to the EAW process. It's keeping them housed in a way that if things are updated in the future, our rule basically points back to where those will be updated. And so it will be easier for us to not have mistakes or have to do rulemaking as often in the future. So it doesn't cause that any type of unnecessary duplication. And then it really refers back to the statute that was just passed. so that we're really conforming as best as possible, which is what we were tasked with doing. One of the cons, though, is that typically people are used to finding those projects laid out in our rule. And so we know that this is different and it strays from that. And that will be a difference if this is the method that is selected to move forward. And then I just want to very quickly talk about, in both options, there are some things that have to be updated regardless. And it doesn't matter which option you pick, but I want to just point out what those are again. And that there are a lot of definitions that will have to be updated. They were changed. We don't want to have to definitions instead of statute 260I. And then we have to update the repealed statutes and rules that are no longer there. They've been moved into 260I and away from some of those other statutes that talk about renewable energy projects in the past. And then one of the things we are recommending is that there are very small transmission lines that are in the EAW category. And with the passing of 216I, those are now housed as part of the project. And they are associated facilities. And so we don't see the need to call them out in the EAW section of Minnesota Rule 4410 any longer, because they will undergo environmental review along with the projects that are highlighted in 216I. And then we're also pointing out that Minnesota doesn't have those types of transmission lines because they don't fit into the energy grid system here in our state. And then we are updating the RGU for one of the categories that was also listed in the act that gave us the ability to conform for nuclear spent, independent spent fuel storage installation. And then we're also including a mandatory environmental impact statement for carbon dioxide. Those were both housed in the same act that gave us the conforming. So finally, I want to finish up with the process as we continue to move forward. So today, we hope to hear from you which of those options you want us to move forward with. We will draft language and bring that back to you at the next board meeting and have you all vote on moving that language forward at the September board meeting. We'll have that in the packet for you all to review. Then we can put this on notice this fall. This does not require a comment period because it is expedited rulemaking and the way that it was written. We're basically just making sure that it matches 269, so it does not require that comment period. So then the rule could be finalized in spring.
I think you meant it doesn't require a hearing. It does require a
Oh,
comment
sorry.
period.
I did.
That's important. I wanted to be really
Thank you,
clear about that.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, that is correct. That is what I have for you today. And the rest of the time, I'd like to hear your feedback on which option you would like to move forward with.
Thanks, Colleen.
Can you go back one slide just so
Sure.
again, sorry.
No problem.
Madam Chair, sorry.
Questions
So
from board members? Go ahead.
Sorry, theoretically, if we move forward with the option 2 or whatever today, and then we have it and we vote on it next week, is there a chance we could go backwards or something? Or like, I'm just curious, like, so then we vote on the full piece next time? Or,
I can take that, but Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think what I heard is we're gonna take questions, comments from board members here today and have a public comment period just for this item today. And that can inform what we bring back next month.
I see.
And the
Okay,
plan would
okay.
then be to vote on it next month.
No, thank you, Chair.
Oh, I see, okay, okay.
Other questions from board members or comments, thoughts?
Guess the thing that I would like to say after reviewing what we're going to cover next with regard to the groundwater policy and the phone calls that I've been getting is user-friendly and understandable and unnecessary duplication. Those were a lot of the criticisms I heard on groundwater. So I'm glad to see that included in the second. I think there's a lot of opinion out there that in order for the user to understand what they're using, they need to be able to understand it and not feel like they're reading in a circle or finding themselves questioning what they're reading. So I guess I appreciate that significantly, especially for the phone calls I've had on groundwater.
Board Member Bakken. Want to add to that? Oh, Nelson. Go ahead, Board Member Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, I just wanted to speak in support of the option 2 staff recommendation. Having authored or revised many local ordinances and rules, just the cascade effect of duplication and tracking so many changes and how they spill over is very difficult. So I like the simplified approach of doing that.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. Other board member questions or comments? Not seeing or hearing any. With that, then I think we, as I mentioned, want to offer the opportunity for public comment. And again, this is just for this item on energy rulemaking. So if you're in person, we'll call your name from the sign-up sheet, or if you didn't get on the sign-up sheet, you can just raise your hand and we'll ask you to join us here to speak. And if you're online, please use the raise hand function if you'd like to comment, or note it in the chat. We can call on you. And you'll be able to unmute yourself online. So please be relatively brief with remarks, and I'll let you know if we have to wrap it up due to time. So with that, we have
Alan Muller and Carol Overland.
Alan Muller first.
All right, on this, did you? Okay, are you on the energy? Are you on that?
Did you want to speak on the energy rulemaking item or for something later?
Well, I do have some thoughts on this. I don't know if this is the right time to share them, but I suppose it's been 9 or 10 years since I've attended an EQB meeting, and I don't see very many familiar faces, and I expect I'm not a familiar face. But one thing that seems very clear to me, one doesn't have to come to this room to see it, that every session of the legislature leaves Minnesota's environment less adequately protected. Not many good things come out of the Capitol with regard to environmental problems. Looking at the 2 alternatives that were presented here, and I haven't studied them in detail, but it seems to me that the second choice, which is identified as preferred, I guess that means preferred by the staff, appears to leave more flexibility and more openings for things to happen that might not be consistent with the intent of Minnesota's environmental review program. So if I had to choose, I would choose alternative number 1. And I guess that's all that I really want to say right now. I don't know what interests are represented by here, except that obviously if the legislature issues a mandate for the EQB to do something, you don't have much choice but to do it. But I would think it ought to be done in the way that minimizes the amount of damage to the effectiveness and integrity of the overall program that you all are charged with. And I'll end with a thought that there's talk about streamlining in some of the stuff, and there's talk about the transfer of responsibility to the Public Utilities Commission. And from my point of view, and I think this is true not just in Minnesota, but in every jurisdiction that has a utility regulatory commission, you're dealing in effect with the utilities themselves. That what I see in the PUC is reflection of the agendas of pipeline companies, electricity, utilities, and so on. So anything that shifts the responsibility more in the direction of the PUC is probably not in the public interest, as I have seen it. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Can you state your name? Did you state your name?
State your name.
Oh, yeah, my name is Alan Muller, and I reside in Red Wing, which is penetrated and surrounded by energy facilities, including garbage burners and nuclear reactors and nuclear waste cask parking lots. So not only as a matter of policy, but as a matter of personal interest, I would like to see the regulation of those facilities not become less effective.
Ms. Oberlin.
My name's Carol Overland. I'm an attorney. I've been working on energy projects, and my first one was nuclear waste before the EQB. And we're talking 30 years ago. How did that happen? But my concern here is we are entering a time when we're having unprecedented high voltage power lines coming through Minnesota. There's, I think it's 11 projects queued up from the, I call it MISO, some call it MISO, what they call tranche 2. And we're looking at some 345 lines, and one of them just started rolling through the process, and a comment period is open on exemptions to the application rules. But my concern is there are 765s, and there's at least 5 or 6 765 lines roaring through Minnesota, and this is after we've already had the MISO 17 portfolio come through. That was mostly southern Minnesota. And then CapEx 2020, which was a $2 billion crisscrossing Minnesota with 345 lines. And we really need to look at, why do we need these? Do we need them? What's going on here? And the problem I see with this update here, we're looking at 345, 765 lines. And how does this fit with such a much larger and more impactful project? I'm really concerned about that. And the other part is public participation. This legislation / public participation. There is no longer a citizen advisory task force. Those have been eliminated. And so as you do this, to look at what's the impact on public participation. Environmental assessments don't have the same iterative process as an EAW. It's environmental review light, if you can even call it that. And it's usually a part of the application, and we don't really have an opportunity to address issues. And usually people on the ground are the ones who know what's going on. I mean, for example, for CapEx, Excel wanted to put it right next to Stanton Airport. They didn't know the Stanton Airport was even there. They wanted to run it through an anthrax field in Scott County. They didn't even know an anthrax field was there. These people on the ground need the opportunity to weigh in and have it be taken seriously. And another one, and I've lost it. But I just urge you to really keep the public in mind here. It's a problem, and I don't know how to deal with it. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm seeing the public's role going down and down and down, and I'm seeing less review going forward. And review for the PUC is done by the Department of Commerce. So look at what that means and what kinds of things they are regarding as important to review, because Commerce has its own agenda. Thank you.
Great comment. There are commenters in the room. Are there any commenters online? I don't see any hands either. All right.
Madam Chair, can I make just one clarifying note to Ms. Overland's last comment, just to make sure we're all on the same page. One of the things that was happened in conjunction with this legislation is that the environmental review staff at Commerce that worked on behalf of PUC have been moved to PUC. So as Colleen noted, that's one of the things we have to change is it says this review should be done by Commerce and it is now PUC. So I just want to be clear that that's one of the things that happened with this legislation as well and is part of the context of the changes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Can I just also just make sure that my name is Brooke Cunningham, I'm the Commissioner of Health, that I was a few moments late. But when we talk about option 2, my understanding is it is not changing anything right now in regulation. It's just about how you find the rules. Is that correct?
Kathleen, you want to take that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this, what we've been charged to do at the EPB, the statute changed things, and we're just conforming to what's done in statute. So there are different, the process is laid out in 269 on how environmental review will need to happen for these types of projects moving forward. And like I mentioned, a lot of them will start out as an EIS, and then potentially they can undergo a different type of review from there. They might be able to be eligible for a standard review, which is the environmental assessment. But all of that was laid out in the legislation. So we're just now conforming our rule to match or be the same as the statute.
Yes, but in terms of option 1 versus option 2, it's just a way to find the guidance, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Question? Any other comment? Any commenters online? Like that. Your hand up.
I've been watching, there are several communities in my part of the state are wrestling with data center proposals and projects. And in general, it doesn't seem that they know how to cope with these things. And I think they need help. And maybe there's some help could be forthcoming by good decisions in this room. But let me mention 2 things. This use of the AUAR.
Oh, that's coming up later.
Yeah, okay,
That's a different item.
that belongs under a different heading. There's a question in my mind as to whether data centers ought to be regarded as energy facilities or energy infrastructure. One can argue that they're consumers rather than producers of electrons, but many of these proposals include sizable transmission lines and/or generation facilities. So some consideration ought to be given to just how how data centers fit into the picture here. And that ought to be something that's clear to people when they look at the publications and the rules. It might help. Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other comments. So again, thank you for the comments on that. And we'll be running this back next month for additional discussion and quite likely voting too. So why don't we go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the Groundwater Policy Report. A vote on the approval of the Groundwater Policy. Oh, should we circle back to the?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it's like, you want to circle back to approving the minutes and the consent agenda. I believe we should have a quorum.
We have a quorum. So thank you for the reminder on that. Back to the consent agenda. And,
I'll move that, Madam Chair.
thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Motion to approve the consent agenda. I should mention too, not only do we have these usual topics and some for vote, we also have guest presentations today from the Roots for the Future students. So we'll be mindful of time on items today. to make sure we have time for our guest speakers who are coming. And so, again, thank you for that motion to approve. And with that, it's second. I think I saw a hand from Board Member Bucket. So you, all right. Any discussion on the motion? So with that, please call the roll on the consent agenda.
All right. Commissioner Arnold, not with us. Board Member Bakken.
Approved.
Board Member Bauer-Kemper. Board Member Brands.
Approve.
Board Member Cunningham. Commissioner Cunningham. Thank you. Chair Daubenberger.
Approved.
Commissioner Gronval. Board Member Hintz. Chair Holman. Board Member Katzenberger. Board Member Katzenberger. It looks not muted. Board Member Katzenberger, we can't hear you. It doesn't look like you're muted. We'll circle.
He
Yeah.
did note in the chat earlier he was having mic issues.
Oh,
Okay.
And Board Member Katzenberg, if you can do your approval or not approval in the chat, I think we think that.
Oh, there he
There he
is.
is.
All right. Board Member Katzenberger, we can see you.
Do a thumbs up.
Okay.
Approved.
All right, Commissioner Kessler is not with us. Board Member Martin. Not present. Commissioner Barilak. Present. Board Member Nelson.
Approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson.
Approve.
Board Member Smith.
Aye.
You, Commissioner Stroman. Not with us, so that is 9 and our quorum. Sure.
Great. Thank you for bringing the consent agenda. So now we will move on to item number 4 in the agenda. Excuse me, item number 5 in the agenda, and that is the Groundwater Policy Report.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'm going to walk and see if I can get this to go on both screens so that it's easier for folks in the room to see it.
Thank you.
Hoping I know which buttons to push to make that happen. Can I change anything? All right, no, I don't know which buttons to push to make that happen. Thought it might make it easier for folks to see, but hopefully this will work. All right, so thank you all. I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the Groundwater Policy Report that is before you for approval today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislative directive, the audience purpose and intent was in the report, particularly the successes, gaps, and opportunities, the appendices and next steps, and then we can have questions and discussions. So EQB is required to report on policy issues related to the coordination of the state groundwater protection programs under Minnesota Statute 103A. And we're required when we submit that report to attach 3 additional reports by some of our member agencies: an assessment of water quality trends and prevention, a groundwater monitoring status report, and a water availability and status report. So in drafting this report and starting to talk to all of you about it at the beginning of this year, the work group, which consisted of many of the agencies that are members of this board, we started by thinking about really who did we want to talk to? Who did we want this report to speak to? And yes, you know, we have the prescribed legislative recipients, but there are also others that we think might find this kind of report useful. So we're including those with funding and policy responsibilities related to groundwater, the local water authorities, and public interest groups that might be looking for data and information to support their understanding of groundwater. So the work group spent a lot of time thinking about this purpose of this report and what we wanted to accomplish. Obviously, we needed to fulfill the legislative request. And past variations of this report have been broader, but we did think it was really appropriate to keep the focus tightly on groundwater, recognizing that all water is connected, but trying to focus on groundwater. And also to make a chance, to take this as a chance to bring together work that is already being done. I think we didn't want to be duplicative. We didn't want to establish goals or statements that were confusing or conflicting. And there's so much work that's being done on water. We didn't want to reinvent or reprioritize needs, but really wanted to give a chance to focus on the coordination piece and show what all of us in this arena, how we work together and how that works. So, and just a reminder that we did do some engagement to get input on what should be included in the report so that it was useful and informative for the identified audiences. So engagement was designed to gather input on the purpose of the report and whether that would meet the needs of the audience, whether the overall direction and the outline that we put forward in February would fulfill that report. And then we asked for ideas for content. I would say generally the comments that we got supported the overall purpose, direction, and outline. And then we got some pretty more detailed comment on content about things like the need for data, the consideration of a concept called water circularity, discussion of large water users, infrastructure, private wells, the need for coordination among agencies, and information sharing and reporting. And I think in general, we were able to at least touch on many of these topics at a high level. So then going into the report contents, the contents really does largely follow the outline that we presented to you all early in the year and that went out for public engagement. We did rearrange some pieces as we were writing in order to improve readability and to reduce duplication. Originally, for example, we planned to sort of discuss all the concerns about groundwater in one piece and then talk about all the state's tools and actions to maintain groundwater in a different piece. But ultimately, that was really difficult to follow and resulted in a lot of duplication. And so we ended up sort of grouping the issue and the responses together. So the report starts with the executive summary, which tries to bring together common themes, focus on our successes and our gaps and opportunities. The introduction section includes the purpose of the report, and then most importantly, articulates an overarching groundwater protection goal. Throughout the report, we talk about how every agency has its own authorities and responsibilities, and that the goal doesn't change or supersede these. It's really just intended to articulate what all of our programs work together to create for the people that we serve. So that overarching goal is that we all work together to ensure that Minnesotans have equitable access to and use groundwater sustainably to meet our common needs. The report then talks about the laws and the roles of each of the agencies. Next it talks about the importance of groundwater at a high level. Then we talk about the laws, and then there's sort of a groundwater 101. After that, we start to move into more of the detailed content. Starting with a major foundation of the state's groundwater protection work, which is the regular monitoring of groundwater quantity and quality, the evaluation and assessment of the data, and how that data and information is provided to others, such as the local governments that are working on water planning and the public. So it talks a little bit about the different types of monitoring, some of the history of monitoring, and the roles of each agency, and then how monitoring data is stored and shared. So that's really a foundational piece. And then we moved on to talk about specific threats to sustainable groundwater. And the agencies really think of that concept of sustainable very broadly and meaning both water quality and water quantity. So in talking about those specific threats, we really wanted to focus on those that are driving our collective work today and into the future. So in looking at the threats to groundwater quality and quantity, each section starts with a discussion of the state's geography and geology and how those impacts the issues. And then we try to provide an overview of the issue and then the actions the state is taking and sometimes supporting or encouraging others to take in responding to the issues, which often starts with understanding the need or scope of the problem, characterizing the problem, and then developing a response. And then again, each section covers successes, gaps, and opportunities. For the groundwater quality issues, we grouped these by contaminant-based challenge. I'm not going to go into details because it's too much really to talk through all of it, but a couple of notes. Nitrate obviously is an issue, big issue of concern, and work to reduce nitrate in Minnesota's water, both surface water and groundwater, is a longstanding need. There are many reports and plans that deal with nitrate, and some of them are actively undergoing review and updating right now. For instance, the draft updated state nutrient reduction strategy is currently on public notice, and there's planning and around nitrate in Southeast Minnesota and reports and documents on that issue as well. So for the nitrate section, we tried in the report to characterize the arc of the state's work on nitrate, how it's proceeded from identifying the issue to increasing our understanding, to developing our response by identifying sources, and then to identify and start to implement actions to reduce nitrate, and then to where we are now, where we need to scale up and move forward. So there's a big section on nitrate. There's also a relatively large section on PFAS, and this is the first time I think that PFAS has been included in an EQB water report. It wasn't included in the 2020 state water plan or in the last groundwater report. I think really in the last 10 years, we've seen PFAS as a pollutant clearly make its transition from an emerging issue to one that is driving programmatic work, and we tried to recognize that. And another note, these are some of the newer issues I'm covering, is the report talks about geogenic contaminants or naturally occurring ones, contaminants that show up in groundwater due to geology. I think in general, we focus on concerns about pollutants that come from human activities and that end up in places that they aren't expected. But there are naturally occurring substances that can be harmful at certain levels. So there's an increasing awareness that those naturally occurring or geogenic contaminants that are due to the dissolution of minerals from the rock, things like manganese, arsenic, sulfate, lithium, and iridium can show up in Minnesota's groundwater at levels we need to be concerned about. So that's kind of a new issue as well. Pesticides and chloride, very important issues, continuing to drive much of the work and was recognized in prior reports. One of the things we did try to do was to do a lot of references to the key reports and plans on these issues, the PFAS blueprint, the nutrient reduction strategy, the drinking water action plan. All of the work that has been done by the state agencies is really the plans that are setting forth the goals and the work rather than repeating it. Next, the groundwater quantity section is laid out a little differently. The main concern for groundwater quantity or having sufficient groundwater now and into the future is, overuse of the groundwater resources. And maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that we would run out of groundwater, but perhaps resources become more difficult or more expensive to access, or water isn't available at the quality that's needed. Enough quantity is not available at the quality needed. See, they're very connected. So the focus on the groundwater quantity section is really about how we use groundwater, how those amounts have changed over time. And we also included kind of a review of a couple of key technologies or industries that may be coming to Minnesota and which are likely to be very important for our economy and in some cases our climate goals, but where water use needs to be carefully considered. This includes data centers, sustainable aviation fuel, hydrogen production, and carbon capture, utilization and storage. And so then the report walks through many of the programs, tools, actions, and other work that the state agencies do to manage our groundwater use, from water appropriation permitting to water supply planning, which is very much a shared state and local tool, to ways that we can manage water demand through efficiency, circularity, and reuse. And then we tried to take kind of a broad look at other challenges that we have that might stand in the way of meeting our goal of sustainable groundwater, looking at the water infrastructure and things like drinking water infrastructure that impact the quality of the water when it's delivered to the folks who need to use it. Subsurface drain tile is a potential contributor to nitrate and groundwater in particular that needs more investigation. In keeping with our strategic plan that has us looking at equity issues in all of our reports, we did cover sort of the different experiences that might be had by private well users, small public water systems that have a smaller base of people to serve, and lead in drinking water. And then throughout the report, we tried to weave in climate and the discussion of how climate change and changes in precipitation and other events really can increase the challenge of meeting our goals, make it more difficult to get to where we want to go. So that's a very brief overview of kind of the contents. I think in key takeaways, the successes, we know there are challenges to groundwater sustainability, but there have been many successes. One of them is funding. Many of the advancements in our groundwater programs over the last 15 years are supported by the funding of the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment. We do think there has been success in coordination. There's multiple coordinating structures and frameworks that support connection and collaboration across the agencies with different authorities and different responsibilities. Data and information. We have extensive groundwater data and are building out tools and systems to understand new issues such as emerging contaminants. Things like groundwater atlases provide a wealth of information about geology and groundwater resources, and we've made progress in providing groundwater data to local governments. In terms of implementation, we have strong systems and programs that support on-the-ground implementation of actions to protect groundwater and drinking water. We have frameworks for taking a broad range of actions to protect groundwater, from research, education and training, planning and technical assistance, grants and cost share programs, and even direct cleanup of contaminated sites. And these include both regulatory programs and voluntary programs with direct state action and extensive support of local implementation. And for many of these, we know what actions can help us to continue to move the needle on groundwater sustainability. And our implementation structures have supported actions to protect groundwater quality and quantity. And in each section of the report, we highlight the successful implementation of programs and actions that improve groundwater. So we're making progress. That being said, there's more to do in all of these same areas. Funding, as we all know, the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment and associated funding continues through 2034. Reauthorizing this funding is critical for ongoing support of the state's water programs. And significant additional funding will likely also be needed to implement actions that protect groundwater at the scale needed. In terms of coordination, we know the agencies have an opportunity to continue to improve communication and sharing about the way that we collaborate and coordinate, and to demonstrate that connection in the ways that we provide data and program information. Although we do have robust monitoring, our groundwater monitoring and information remains less extensive than what we have for surface water. The geologic atlases are not yet available for all counties, so extensive work has been done, and that work needs to continue. We need to improve our ability to characterize groundwater quality at the aquifer scale and to provide data and information in a synthesized way that's accessible, comprehensible, and easily integrated with the way water quality planning and project implementation are delivered. But we do have programs and systems in place to implement the groundwater protecting actions. They will need continued support and likely expansion to ensure they can deliver results at the scope and scale needed to tackle these issues. And then the actions need to be increased. Some of those solutions to our groundwater challenges may be technological, new ways to remove contaminants, more efficient ways of using water for irrigation in industry, in our homes. But increased implementation of other solutions is likely to require shifts in larger systems and understandings. And in many areas, actions at the scale needed are going to require changes. That might mean thinking about a circular water economy rather than a once-through water economy, changing market incentives and systems, or making other similar changes. And that's reflected, I think, in many of the reports that we cite throughout the groundwater report. And we do need to continue to work to ensure that Minnesotans have equitable access to drinking water in particular as part of groundwater. And this includes a need to focus on equity and information, water protection and financing for private well owners, small water systems and communities disproportionately exposed to contaminants in drinking water. So that is the really fast overview of the 100-page report that we have. There are the 3 appendices that were attached that go in depth on their particular topics. So the assessment of water quality trends and prevention, which covers both surface and groundwater, the groundwater monitoring status report, and the water availability and assessment report, which covers, again, both surface and groundwater. So next steps for the board, we are asking you today to approve the report content. We do have to do final, checks for typos and design. We have a very preliminary design. We'll make the report look a little prettier and compilation of that report. So the resolution allows those final pieces to happen. And then we would roll it out. So we'll submit it to the legislature. It's due on September 15th. Publish it on the EQB website, and we're continuing to look for additional opportunities to share it. And then finally, my many, many thanks to the interagency work of folks from all of our water agencies and other agencies as well that helps write this report. It was a team effort, and I'm very appreciative of all of their work. And with that, I am happy to take questions. And we probably, if you have really detailed questions, I think we have several folks in the room that can help answer them.
Thank you, Director Nuclear, and I echo your thanks to this entire group and all the good work that went into the report. Appreciate that. So with that, board members, do you have any questions or comments on the report content?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Board Member Bucket.
I had a couple of questions precipitated mostly from phone calls that I received after the information was put out there. Consolidation, was a lot of the stuff that was put together, was that from previous years or is this completely ground zero to this? Or not ground zero, but was this completely new, or was it a compilation of a bunch of old stuff, or not old stuff, but previously written?
Sure, Board Member Bracken. I mean, we started by sort of looking at the 2015 report and kind of what had been discussed at that point, what kind of graphs, what kind of information was shared, picked up a lot of that and said we wanted to continue it forward. And then in discussions with the agencies about like what they were working on and what they wanted to bring forward, that's where a lot of it came from. I would say most of it does draw on vast majority of it draws on other reports and information.
And my second question, I admit I didn't read the whole 100+ pages of the report, but I did notice in the target audience, the target audiences were being communicated with regard to the letter that we received from the Red River Water Management Board. Was an organization like theirs one of the target audiences, and in particular looking at ag? Is that one of the organizations that were being communicated with being a target audience?
Madam Chair, Board Member Bakken, we reached out pretty broadly through like our EQB channels. We didn't have specific meetings with anyone in particular. A couple of people asked to talk to us about some specific issues, and then when we took comment in May, April, we tried to broadly kind of ask for feedback.
For board member questions.
So I just want to thank everybody, certainly, everybody who worked on this report, even if you're bringing together, all of the old sources to have it come together in one place, be updated and, 100 pages, single space, basically throughout. It's such hard work and so important for Minnesotans. I think we in this room and folk in the community and even in industry recognize that we all need water, right? Like, I'm so glad that health is at the table because I think that is a fundamental foundational concern about water and the risks to water, and really appreciate the extension that we've done to put PFAS in here, to put the other geogenic compounds that, we're learning more about in here, and to really talk about our coordinated approach, because certainly that is needed. I would like to invite, if you all would allow me, some of our team members to sort of reflect on the report, if that would be okay, or should I wait until the,
Or we go.
You
Either,
either-
go ahead and do that right now since they're representing.
thank
Your
you.
agency.
I know a few people are online, but Tanny, might you also take a second to sort of reflect on MDH's work in this space? Certainly, we are a little more downstream, right? 75% of Minnesotans get their drinking water from groundwater, right? And so we come, and I know when we start detecting those contaminants in our drinking water, but so important for our health. Tanny, do you have any comments? And certainly no pressure, you could always pass, but I know you're on. Check elevated.
Diesel is working on that.
That is Tanny.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, go
Tanny.
ahead. Okay, if you, actually, I think Hazel's still working on mute. Hold on one moment. Go ahead, Tanny.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Executive Director Nuschler and Commissioner Cunningham. Yeah, I just want to, reiterate the teamwork that went into this report, particularly for those of us in drinking water. We really see our sister water agencies as doing the front lead work when it comes to protecting groundwater. And then we come behind and we base much of our work on the initial monitoring and work of our sister agencies. I will note, as Catherine did, that for the first time we've included geogenic contaminants, those that come from the geology formations. And this is really important, especially for drinking water, because these are significant human health concerns, and public perception of them often is really low, that they're low risk, because if they're a gift from Mother Nature, how can they be a problem for people? And particularly when it comes to things like arsenic, the toxicology has changed a lot since 1974, and then reevaluation of it under the Clinton administration. And we continue to learn more about it, and that it's a carcinogen. And so we want to use this report as a way to highlight the threat that arsenic is to people's health. And so the inclusion of geogenic contaminants is really significant in this report. And I think I'll just conclude my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see we have a hand up by Board Member Nelson. Why don't we go to, and then Commissioner Cunningham, if you have other team members out there who also might. Okay, let's go to Board Member Nelson.
Madam Chair, thank you. I also want to point out that Public Member Bauer-Kemper wants to ask a question, but his raise hand thing isn't functioning. He said that in chat. So, very nice report, and I want to thank staff and the agencies for this. And, I've spent 40 years in the water resources world, and fortunately you can cut me off whenever you want. So feel good about that. But I do want to, and maybe Public Member Bauer-Kemper can expand on this, but I'm pleased to see we had this debate when we were considering bylaws of the kind of the administrative organization versus the board, and when each was speaking. And so I was pleased to see in the report that it says it's a report by the agencies, because not because I disagree with things, but I don't have the opportunity to review and decide on all this. So I appreciate that and thank you. I would ask, though, that in the resolution, is it appropriate for us to adopt the report, or should we really be releasing it as the action under that thought? My second comment is, and it's kind of related to the comment letter that we got from our friends in the Red River Valley, that as a person that worked much of my career for local units of government, that when we read a report written by state agencies, with a capital S, to talk about something at the small s, kind of statewide, that includes everybody, we frequently feel left out a little bit. And I understand that, because you don't know everything that's going on at the local levels, or if you included it all, the report would be insanely complex and long. And so I do kind of wonder, maybe for the next one, not this one, is there some language in there that you can have about, and it's not just limited to groundwater, something to the effect that, there are authorities at all kinds of levels, and that in the water world, sometimes those authorities are at the state level, and it's very, very clear that the whole package remains at the state level. Other times, authorities are somewhat divided and actually give local units of government the opportunity to either be more restrictive or more targeted. And so thus, it's really difficult to describe everything that's going on, because it does vary across the state. But it's a very good approach because it allows some tailoring. Now, people may not exactly agree with what I said there, but something to that effect would, I think, help with the locals who are struggling a little bit with not being recognized and having some of those kinds of comments. But the policy question on that might be worth considering or talking about at some point is, okay, which approach is correct in terms of, I heard my county administrator once say, states provide framework, local units of government deliver. Now, that's not necessarily true across all of the things, and that's not necessarily true of water. Sometimes it's that way. Sometimes it's, when the SWCDs do the hands-on stuff with farmers, it's delivered locally. And so that, I think the policy part of that is that should be considered strategically whenever we create new programs or new legislations as a recommendation as to where is it best or most effectively delivered. I also think one of the things that is an opportunity, and again, it doesn't have to be mentioned this time, but at some point, is a few years ago, before I retired, I counted up the number of water plans that existed in Scott County, and there were 50 in one county. Stormwater protection plans, groundwater protection plans, water supply plans, watershed plans, on and on and on. And now we have actually gotten to the point that many of these plans are second or third generation. And I think the planning process could probably be simplified much more. And I noticed one of the gaps or things that you said in here is we do need much more action. And so simplifying the planning process, which takes a lot of resources locally, would allow resources more toward action. So that's another thing I would think at some point to consider. And finally, one more, two more. Another opportunity or gap is I think the whole process of groundwater planning or surface water planning, and again, it's to simplify in the planning process, but we need to be able to move quickly and adapt quickly. So the whole business of revising plans or updating them needs to be done in a way that allows us to adapt and change things very quickly, because the world is changing very quickly around us. And then my last comment, maybe is a question for staff, is I noticed in the report under chlorides, there were no gaps or opportunities identified, and I'm wondering if that was intentional or I missed it somehow. And quite frankly, when I think about it, I can't really think of any programmatic gaps. I can think of gaps in logic, like we need to salt things for safety purposes versus let's hold back a little bit for water quality purposes. So those are my comments, other than that the little piece on counties just only mentioned that counties can do groundwater plans. There's a lot more, and being from a county and wearing my county hat. We did septic systems, we did solid waste management, we were the entities for the watersheds, and on and on. So that is a little bit limiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. Thank you for providing all those thoughts. And I did hear at least one question here. Chloride. Do you want to address that?
Sure. Yeah, Madam Chair. I mean, just generally, Board Member Nelson, I mean, thank you for those comments. I think a lot of what you mentioned is definitely things that we discussed and that we tried to at least step into by talking more about the multiple levels of government and what they can do, and certainly, you know, trying to talk about that framework versus delivering, and many thanks to particularly my colleagues at Bowser, who helps me understand and learn more about that on the ground implementation versus the framework and who does what where, and the multiple planning. So I appreciate that. Like I said, we tried to move in that direction a little bit, but it sounds like we have more to do. The chloride gaps and opportunities, you know, that section was primarily written by the MPCA and put together by them. And I'm going to have to go back and check that I didn't inadvertently miss something there. You know, I think it is a program that since 2015, when it was first put in the last groundwater policy report, there's really been a lot of work done by MPCA in chloride plans and things like that we wanted to emphasize. So I don't know off the top of my head, but I will double check that we didn't inadvertently miss a heading or miss a chunk of text in some way.
Thank you, Director Nuschler. And did I hear that Board Member Bauer-Kemper had his hand up? Okay, sorry, I didn't see that. Board Member Bauer-Kemper, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My apologies. My raise hand button is grayed out and disabled somehow. So I appreciate y'all seeing me in the chat. Are y'all able to hear me okay?
Hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Again, all right. Thank you, Chair. Much and many thanks to so many of you who I can and can't see, and surely who are here and not here, for all the work that you've done on this report, and, you know, perhaps more importantly, the work that you do on the issues at hand. And thank you to Catherine for your impressively concise presentation of that sizable report. I apologize for being a bit late. I was double booked with an obligation, and so I came in for the presentation and made it there. I have a question that arises in relation to a section of the report that indeed Catherine referenced in those slides, which is the brief discussion of data centers. And as the report emphasizes, the difficulty of projecting water use for not yet fully proposed data center projects. So between seeing that section in the report and hearing about it moments ago, and then also I'll note, between receiving as an EQB public member an increasing number of inquiries about data centers, I'd like to learn more about the proposal process through which we might learn about the water needs, the proposal and environmental review process for data centers. And so I'm wondering if we as the EQB could perhaps identify and invite a relevant guest to come and help us better understand the relationship between the alternative urban area framework and data center development. This is a topic that appears to be arising in various places, districts around the state, and I think we as a board would benefit from learning more about the references that are made in that section of the Groundwater Policy Report to learn more about, build our knowledge about the AUAR process and how it might and might not connect to data center projects. So not something that I'm expecting for us to tend to today, but something that arises in relation to the report and that I certainly would like to know more about and be able to speak more about to folks who increasingly come my way with questions about this. So I'll just put that forth as a suggestion and hopefully something we can return to soon. Thanks.
Board Member Howard. Any thoughts
I
on
say,
that?
Board Member Bauerkemper, I did mention this at the beginning, that I do, right, it is an issue that we're increasingly hearing more about. You all had some comments in your packet, and I noted there's recently been 2 lawsuits filed on the AUARs that appear to include data centers. So yes, it's on my mind, and I hear you, and I think it will be a topic that will come back and we'll return to in the next couple of months for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. My apologies for the redundancy in my
No worries.
absence here. Thanks.
Both. Right. Any other board members comments? Board Member Brandt.
One brief one. Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding nitrate and health impacts. Don't hear this a lot probably, but if you want to know what will happen to the Minnesota population that has lots of nitrates in drinking water, look no further than to the great state of Iowa, which has been doing that experiment since the 1920s, I'd say, and there's been some more research out lately showing adverse effects on in utero, low birth weight, low short-term gestation. And there's a lot of data that's been collected there over time that I'm not sure that we do that so much in Minnesota, but it's I think a thing to keep an eye on.
That plague.
I think Iowa's up to second in the nation on cancer rate per 1,000 or 100,000. So
Oh, really?
not all of
Okay.
it due to the nitrate, but probably some of it.
No, thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members?
So I will just both sort of acknowledge and in some ways sort of second both of my colleagues on the board comments. Also, folks who have joined us in the room in terms of, the question around data centers keeps coming up. And water is a finite resource. Data centers require a lot of water. I think we as agencies, I think the public wants to understand and know more. So I appreciate everybody for lifting that up, getting of the meeting and at this point, and also to Board Member Brandt, I know there's been some, I believe, engagement with MDH around nitrates and sort of understanding the full impact of nitrates on health in ways that we are increasingly learning, and certainly that some of our landscape as the neighbor is very similar to Iowa's, and so also thank you for your engagement.
To Cunningham. Great. Any others from board members? Not seeing or hearing again. And again, want to offer the opportunity for the public to make comments. So if you're here in person, call your name and you can join us here to speak. And if you're online, please use the raise hand function if you'd like to comment, or note in the chat that you'd like to comment. And so we will go on to those who signed up to speak and but actually, I do see someone in the room would like to speak. So go ahead and state your name.
Okay. Carol Overland. I also live in Red Wing, and I'm still an attorney. I got quite the education in coal gasification and carbon capture when I worked against the Accessory Energy Masaba project. That was a large part of what it was. And I noticed the interaction here between the sustainable aviation fuel and the CO2 carbon capture sections, because when those are combined, which they are literally, that you end up with a much higher water usage. And I note that they're talking, see on page 79 about third pathway being explored, and then when we get to 80, increasing interest. But gasification and synfuels and was all began in World War II by the Germans, and we had in the mid 80s a really big push for use of this. And then starting 2005, we had another big push in the US. And so I'm thinking we're missing a lot of institutional knowledge here about how this works and doesn't work. But the big problem with carbon capture is that it does, like it says here, consume 30% or more of a facility's power input. I had to sign an NDA to get the information, but it's a lot more than 30%. And that's a lot of power, parasitic power. And carbon capture, when you capture it, what do you do with it? And usually it's pumped into aquifers. And so what will be the impact if there's a sudden increase in pumping water, CO2 into aquifers? What happens? And I have a client that lives over the natural gas dome down in Waseca. And when they pump the natural gas in, and that goes into the aquifer, she gets black water out of her well. And this is a problem. So this is something that should be looked at. Carbon capture isn't really happening. And it's a lot of talk and a lot of money going into it, but it's not really happening. And that is a very important thing to be thinking about when looking at this sustainable aviation fuel, which is probably, we know the ethanol is a large part of this carbon capture and pipeline issue. I think it's a pipe dream, as much as the Masapa project was in 2005. And I think that's something to consider. Thank you.
Ellen Muller. This report, I found this report frustrating to read because it seems to me to be more descriptive than actually a policy report in the sense of giving us a path forward. The management of water resources in Minnesota is relatively ineffective, whether we're talking about groundwater or surface waters or atmospheric water. And the reason for that, I think, is fundamentally simple. The responsibility is divided among so many entities, so many levels of government, so many agencies, that nobody is really held responsible for delivering a result. And until we change that, we're going to continue to have frustrating discussions and a seemingly infinite number of reports, all of which are probably competent in and of themselves. But we need what we need, I think, is an integrated approach to this. To give one trivial example, the appropriation of surface water in Minnesota is governed generally by the DNR. The discharge is regulated by the PCA under an NPDES permitting program. And probably both of those efforts are carried out competently, but the agencies may not have the same timeline, the same agenda, the same political obligations. So what we should be looking at here is how can this water resource management be integrated more effectively than it is? And I'll mention, let me give you, this is sort of a small example, but if you look at page 72 of the draft report, where it talks about categories of water use, we're identifying power generation, meaning combustion power plants, as the largest single source. And this is described as non-consumptive because it's returned to the original sources, unquote. But if you look at the modeling of this, it often appears that, in fact, it is a consumptive use because we're increasing the temperature of the receiving waters and increasing evaporation rates. And that might seem like a non-trivial matter, but given the volume of cooling water that we're dealing with, it has a significant impact. Another example, and then I'm going to shut up, could relate to water quality in the southwestern part of the state where ethanol is a big deal. And it appears that ethanol plants were aggressively promoted and subsidized, especially in the legislature, without any real consideration of the effect on water quality, which has been horrendous. So I would think that if the legislature or others are seeking advice from the EQB about how to improve water resource management, that a more integrated approach would be indicated as opposed to a purely descriptive approach. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Why don't we see if there are any other public commenters online? Not all the thoughts on this. So again, thank you for all the comments and questions that were brought up here today. And with that, there is the resolution in the packet approving the 2025 groundwater report. Again, that's as Director Schler was explaining, to approve the report content. So is there a motion?
Motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Cunningham. Is there a second?
Second by member Katzenberger.
Thank you, Member Katzenberger. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Why don't we go ahead and call the roll on approving the resolution to adopt?
Madam Chair, so this is the resolution to adopt the report. Resolve that the executive director may make editorial formatting and design changes, and then to fulfill the legislative mandate by attaching the assessments, which are just drafting your report and submitting them. So that is in your packet. All right, Commissioner Arnold. Not present. Board Member Bakken.
Support.
Board Member Bauer-Kemper.
Yes.
Board Member Brands.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Chair Dobbenberger.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gronvall. Board Member Hintz. Chair Holman.
Aye.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Yes.
Commissioner Kessler. Board Member Martin. Commissioner Verlick. Board Member Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Board Member Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Stroman. Not present. With that, Madam Chair, we have. Well, I think count. I thought. Oh, yes, we have 10 ayes and 7 not voting.
Okay, so the motion is approved, moves forward, and so that's the content of the groundwater quality report. So thank you all. Thanks again for the work on that, all those who were involved in that. Thank you, board members, for the discussion today. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Now that is going to get us right about to the point of presenters coming in. And so I think we're going to shift in the agenda to after the break, hear the presenters and then go to the plan. That's okay.
Fine with
That
me,
way.
Madam Chair.
All right. Why don't we plan to do that? So if you can come back at just before 2:45, 2:44, please.
Miles.
Yeah, why don't we?
Yeah. It's really interesting to see like in Texas.
And, thanks everybody for coming back into the room and, nice full room today. I took a little more time on the break than what I said I was going to allow, so I apologize for that. Thanks for hanging with us, those online. And as I noted right before the break, we are going to, move ahead in the agenda. We have our presenters here today. So, we have our folks from the Roots for the Future students and their presentations. So Priscilla Vialot, Communications and Engagement Coordinator for the EQB, will introduce the Roots for the Future program and our students who are going to be presenting. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you first.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to wait for the program needs to come join me, so I'll turn it over to them in just a minute.
Please be careful of all the cables.
Everyone, good afternoon. I'm Priscilla Viawater, Communications and Engagement Coordinator. And today is a very different, special day for what I'll be presenting. I'm not going to be talking very much. I'm going to hand it over in just a sec. But before I do that, I wanted to give a little bit of a background as to why we are here today with these great youth who learned from this amazing program this summer. So EQB has been involved in youth engagement since 2013. We had our first youth congress in 2013 and then another one in 2017. And then we had another excuse me, Youth Voices annual board meeting in 2018. And then in 2019 through 2021, we had a youth engagement program called Emerging Environmental Leaders that went on for a couple of years. And then with turnover and the pandemic and things just happened. And so that program was sort of left out in the open. And so we found this great opportunity to sort of partner and fund this great program that we'd heard about called Roots for the Future that's being run through the Environmental Initiative. And the program has been going on since October 2021. It's focused on youth from the Twin Cities, ages about 14 and 18. And it's designed to equip youth from historically underrepresented communities with education, skills, and connections needed to understand leaders in environmental fields. They've learned about all kinds of different career opportunities and skills. They had lunch and learns, so people from doing environmental work would come and talk to the youth and kind of talk about their career paths. I know I was able to attend a lunch and learn, and I think a couple of our board members did as well. And so they learned about a range of things in a matter of just 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And one of the things that they also learned about was community safety and learning that you have to be able to take care of one another and yourself before you can engage in environmental work. I think that was a very key part of the program, as well as learning about social justice as well as environmental justice and everything in between. So with that, in this next slide here, I'll turn it over to Tonya and Sammy, who are the program leads for Roots for the Future. And then they'll bring up students and they'll have presentations about what they learned and share their experiences from over the summer. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all.
Oh, or even clicker. So I do it forward.
Yep.
All right. So my name is Tonya Drawn. I work for Environmental Initiative. We actually had a prior program called Northside Safety Net that was a part of our existence since 2021. And in 2024, we decided to take a pause in the program to make sure that we had capacity, and we wanted to make sure that we were really doing the program justice. So they brought me in. Not sure why necessarily, but they brought me in. I have tons of kids. I have tons of grandkids, but I have run programs with youth. My youth have been in programs. I work in it, and I used to work in the education and organizing field, so my whole life surrounded kids, and so they gave me an opportunity community to re-envision what this program should look like. And I constantly tell the story, we put a St. Paul girl in front of a North Minneapolis program. The first thing the St. Paul girl is going to do is bring it into St. Paul itself. So the first thing we did is change the geography of who is invited into this program, recognizing there's tons of youth that live in the suburbs and also in the city that don't get the touches of environmental careers or don't get talked to about environmental careers. We wanted to change that trajectory. With that, the other thing we did is we brought in trauma-informed care, so making sure that with our current circumstances and most of our urban areas in the Twin Cities and even some of our suburbs in the Twin Cities, youth are seeing and facing a lot of different things from mental health, from drug abuse, conflict resolution, just things like that. So we also wanted to make sure, as well as the environments that we might put them in as a career, that they also know how to be community leaders to their own community, take care of their own community, and can be seen as a go-to person for everything in their community, not just environmental things that we see as a traditional environmental ways to be. With that, this year I was able to hire some people to help me run this program, because I told Mike, who is Mike Harley, our executive director of environmental initiative, I was like, you know, if I do this, this takes me away from everything all summer long. He's like, no, we can't do that. So he let me hire an amazing staff, which Sammy Maldonado is a part of, as well as Kara Dad Cintron, who is actually at her full-time job now. And then we were able to bring one of the youth from Northside Safety Net back to be our program intern. And so he was our program intern for Roots for the Future this year, kind of giving me a ways like, hey, did we do this for Northside Safety Net? What's different? Did you like it? Things like that as well. So our internship overview is we did take them everywhere. We had a 6-week thing of climate change. So we tackled it with air, water, soil. We didn't go into energy quite yet, but we did do a lot of things so they could get a gist of it. We talked about stormwater in urban neighborhoods. We went out to Mississippi River Barge, living lands exhibit. We tree planted in Hennepin County and also at Frogtown Farms in St. Paul. They really love the tree planting. We then actually went back to Frogtown Farm and did a day of just gardening and being one with the soil. They absolutely loved it. We talked about pollinator gardens and what the importance of pollinator gardens are with the workshop with one of our partners for the summer as well. And then we had food justice. We talked about the importance of food and food systems. And then we also invited them to do a salad challenge. I don't think they'll ever look at a salad the same way. I'm surprised they still are eating salads, but I don't think they'll ever look at salads the same way. We had wonderful people from you guys, the Environmental Quality Board and the Minnesota Climate Action Plan. They were actually able to give feedback on the Minnesota Climate Action Plan. And so they actually did some amazing posters about what they thought should be added to giving that voice to policy. We had a week on advocacy and policy. What does that look like? How do you take action on a campaign issue or an education issue? How do you go back and organize your community around that? So not only do they learn environmental things and things about how to be community leaders, but also how to take action, right? And I told myself, you might not need it now, but that time in your life where you come, when you're going to want to take action, like, wait a minute, I remember Ms. Tonya and Sammy taught them how to do this. We went through that. We actually had a role play where they actually had to play a government passing a bill, and they got to play opposite sides. We had experts and community testimony. They got to vote on whether or not the bill passed. They got very excited. They're very competitive. We found out we had some siblings that always made it very competitive for us. So it was really kind of interesting. We took them to the Capitol. That was part of that. Our lunch and learns again were just to make sure that we put people in front of them that had a variety of different career pathways. Not everybody had the same career pathways, but some people went in this full throttle, knew what they were going to do, had a passion for it and things like that. Other ones is like, oh my gosh, this career picked me. And the youth kind of drilled them. They asked them about their salaries, they asked them about their savings, they asked them about all kinds of different things. While they were eating lunch, they said they didn't like that part because it's hard to talk and eat at the same time. They went to the Capitol. We actually even had some advocates. I have some friends that are advocates, a person from EJCC, Environmental Justice Coordinating Council, and somebody else that does a lot of social justice work. So even giving them views on how those careers can impact you and how you get into those careers as well. I think these were all the people that came to either do a workshop or we're lunch and learn speakers. We have a village around us. We gave them lots of love and lots of people. Just an amazing turnout for that. And of course, our funders, we couldn't have done it without you all and others who then invested in us, giving the youth some stipends so they can come and see my smiley face every day. Pay for things like transportation and food. Oh my gosh, they ate so much food. So those are other things that, and it allowed me to hire an amazing staff as well. So I'm gonna let Sandy take over and we're gonna sit up here with them so they don't feel like they're by themselves because we didn't want them. Although they did an amazing job last Thursday to a really, really packed house of family and friends and supporters. Don't think they'll be too jittery today. But I'm gonna turn it over to Sandy.
Yeah, so this is the fun part of the intern presentations. We had the interns select a topic or something in like a community issue or environmental justice issue they want to dive deeper in, and then work on that over the 6-week program. So this is whatever topic they were interested in or thought was deserving of attention. And we just let them kind of go with whatever direction they wanted. So we'll have the interns come up and they'll present just about 2 to 3 minutes each. I know we don't have a microphone, so interns please project and be loud so everyone can hear you. Oh, well, not a microphone, not for the yeah. And then we do have a video of one of the interns who wasn't, oh, these are all of the interns that graduated. So it was 19 total, all over parts of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities. The farthest one is here with us today from Waseca. So again, just expanding that outreach of youth interested in environmental and social issues. And this is the video we have. If we're able to play that, I'm not sure who has.
Yes, if you just go to the next slide.
Okay. So this was Messiah. She's from Golden Valley, and she did a Apple Valley. She did a spoken poem on More Than Going Green.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing and then I'm gonna share with sound.
Okay, thank
Right
you.
back to that.
Okay. Do I click something or is it on?
I think you should be able to play. Here.
There's no.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nazara Baker. I'm 16 years old. I go to Apple Valley High School. And for my final presentation, I decided to write a spoken word free verse poem because I do enjoy writing. And the title is More Than Going Green. Starting out, I believed it was.
Any way to raise the volume?
I think I have it.
Catherine?
It is up as far as it can go from here.
What in the mic part of it? To the right of the mic?
I think that's just
That's
input. Can you?
That won't do it either.
Okay, I'm gonna start again.
But this is new. We haven't done videos before, so we're all learning together.
Hi, my name is Nazara Baker. I'm 16 years old. I go to Apple Valley High School. And for my final presentation, I decided to write a spoken word free verse poem because I do enjoy writing. And the title is More Than Going Green. Starting out, I believed it was all about going green. I thought it was just about recycling bins and metal straws, but now I see it's much larger than that. It's in the way some voices are never considered in climate conversations, the way change always starts small but spreads wide when people are seen. I've learned that environmental justice means more than planting trees. It means unlearning old habits, relearning new ones, and speaking up even when your voice shakes. 6 weeks of workshops taught me to listen before trying to fix, to lead without needing to be loud, to see the earth as something sacred, not just something to be saved. Because I now know the future needs all of us, not just the doctors, not just the lawmakers, but everyday people willing to change their lives so life itself can continue. It needs hands willing to plant, voices able to speak, and hearts prepared to care even when it's inconvenient. The earth doesn't just belong to those who came before us, it belongs to those who will come after, and what we do now decides what they inherit.
Quiet, but hopefully you got some of the sense of just really an amazing poet Zach is. So
we wanted to share that to start and just kind of encapsulate what we wanted to bring to the program of that confidence and creativity in terms of addressing problems in the community. So next we have Amari, who I'll invite up here. So Amari was one of the interns who was able to be part of a placement off site. So he was with a community garden at Hancock Community Center. And so he was able on certain days, he would go do urban agriculture and be outside of our classroom space. And I think that's an element we want to incorporate more in the future, is having some community placement sites with the interns for them to get that real world work experience. We'll pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I kind of just got off of sickness, so I'm gonna try my hardest to like raise my voice. But I'm Amari Sherrod. I was working as an intern for Roots for the Future. And before I start, I want to thank Miss Tanya and Miss Sammy for giving me the opportunity, because I really enjoyed the experience. But before I started this job, I was working as a babysitter, so I didn't really know much about conservation and just like being outside, because I thought outside was just outside. There's nothing really special to it. So after doing things like planting trees at Frogtown Farms and learning about tree canopies and urban heat environments and pollinators and heat islands, is really like, it's giving me the motivation to like learn more about conservation and how climate change affects everyone and not just humans. But what I really want to highlight is working with Steph Ankerson. That was like my favorite part of the internship, because I was tasked with helping the youth and introducing them into gardening. So we did things like we made fresh garlic salt, we made homemade soda. We actually planted herbs. That was fun because it was more like hands-on. So yeah, doing things like that, it really just gave me the motivation to pursue a career that includes conservation and also helping the youth. Thank you.
Also with the internship placement site, the same one as Amari.
Hi y'all, I'm Pat Baldwin, and I'm an intern at Roots for the Future. I obviously went to the same little off-site planting thing that he did. Not no presentation, there's just like a little run through what this week's was like. So our first week was obviously expectations and introductions with everybody, just building the foundation of it with relations, and we also had our first like workshop. It was a track little training. It was led by Princess, and she did a really great job. Taught us many different things, like in a bad situation, how to help somebody in there, type of stuff, On our second week, we did urban heat island, talked about that, and tracking it. So we went out with these little thermometers, and then we just stuck it at random parts of outside and saw how different materials in and out of shade absorb more or less heat. We also started our references, cover letters, and one-on-ones with one another. Really, really nice. Haven't had a job mention that before. We had our first field trip. It was a barge exploration. And if you don't know what that is, a barge is like a flat boat, pretty much. And on our third week, we did a monarch glow venture. We talked about how monarch butterflies help the environment, what they do, how they've been changing throughout time, their habits altogether. And we also mentioned tree equity and canopy and how we can advocate for change with that pretty much. And we also planted a tree, our first tree at Frogtown Farm. On our fourth week, we did a little food justice workshop and talked about how gaining access to healthy food is not always possible or even likely in every area. And I also had my first day at Steph's little off-site internship program. That was really fun. Just jumbled all of the off-site thing into like one memory, so I'm just gonna share that. And on our 5th week, we talked about advocacy versus lobbying, and we talked about people that represented us, areas, city and state. We also did communication practices with one another, more of our like one-on-ones, references, stuff like that. And then we also had Uplift Minnesota talk about building a campaign, advocate for change. That was really nice. And we also had a field trip to the Science Museum in downtown St. Paul. So really, really nice. Tuesday's little field work. That was me. Every Thursday. 4 weeks. As you heard, we would plant stuff. We would make seasoned salt. Every week we would have a different type of tea. Very much made her own tea. I was pretty much it.
Was very shy the first week. He kind of sat in the back of the room, but he's grown a lot. As I said, he was the first intern who asked like what I was doing for the weekend, which was very reflective. And he's like, "What are you doing this weekend?" And he was like, "What are you doing this weekend?" Oh, okay, thanks.
Go to the school. This is kind of short. But my name is Keith Harris. I root for the Future. I have joined this program and experienced nature, opportunities, advocacy, healing, poems, firearm safety, narcan medical. They help me learn the saving money, budgeting, food marketing, and focus on what's important and how long we can class small numbers. And this program also helps me learn how to be creative, look help the communities, sitting on the upgrade teams ideas, like planting more trees in empty areas around Minneapolis and Paul, for our city's temperature, with more food for people. Minneapolis and Paul. That's it.
So as some of the youth like and Kaya mentioned is we had a training led by Princess Titus, who works at Appetite for Change. And so that was the first week as a way to bring trauma-informed learning and basically like practices into the entire internship. So in that training, they talked about firearm safety, Narcan, and what to do in a situation like an overdose, which actually was informative for me as well, because I didn't know you could have an overdose or experience it in a hospital setting. And so I was learning alongside the youth as well. And I think there's some topics getting, but just overall.
They talked a little bit of mental health as well, and just conflict resolution within the community, how to de-escalate, how to get rid of it, or how to avoid it. Best practices as far as that goes. They did an amazing job, and the kids, they really stuck with the kids. Part of it, I think, is the side of the ties, but also just things that might be missing that they don't know about, how to prevent things that they see. So we're glad, we're happy to put this in there, but we also had, even that day, we had Dr. Sharonda Orridge come in and just talk about power of the pen and how to write your own narrative, how to write your story about environmental justice. So with these presentations, it started from the very first week with recognizing how to present yourself, how to talk about your story, as opposed to letting somebody else create that narrative for you. So some of the youth really took to heart Princess's presentation, and we're happy they did. And so the first youth that we have coming up next are Serenity and Amaya.
We just
Hi everyone, I'm Serenity. I'm Maya. Hi. Today we're going to be talking about art.
You don't want to stand?
Yeah, because it's kind of weird.
It's the green, right? It's the arrow that's to the right side.
Okay, why we, oh, sorry, you're good. Okay, let's move on. Okay, why we chose this topic? We chose to do our final project on Narcan because it's a life-saving tool in the opioid crisis. We want to raise awareness about its importance and how it can prevent overdose deaths.
Opioid overdose has become a major public health emergency affecting people of all ages and backgrounds, including youth. Learning about Narcan and the dangers of opioids early can help young people protect themselves, look out for friends, and be a part of preventing overdose deaths in their community. What is Narcan? Naloxone, also called Narcan, is a medication that can reverse an opioid overdose. It works by attaching to the same brain receptors that opioids do, blocking their effect and helping restore normal breathing within minutes. Opioids are a group of drugs that include heroin and fentanyl, and certain prescription painkillers like Oxycontin and Ritalin. They can be helpful for pain relief when used as prescribed, but they can also be very dangerous if someone takes too much or how it's helpful. Narcan only reverses the effects of opioids, but it stays to repeat, and even if you don't have opioids in your system. If you see someone having an opioid overdose and you don't know what caused it, it's safe to administer Narcan.
Well, one way is to use Narcan. One of the first ways you can administer Narcan is auto-injection. An auto-injection is a life-saving tool for opioid overdose. It's a pre-filled single-use device, a medication that quickly reverses the effects of opioid overdose for emergency use. How to administer Narcan is first to remove case, then remove safety cap, then last place and inject to front of the thigh and can switch thighs, and put on your shoulder, can go through clothing, can do as often as necessary. The second way is nasal spray. Adults and children, all ages, can take 4 milligrams, put one spray into one nostril, and another spray may be given into the other nostril every 2 to 3 minutes until they wake or until the emergency responders arrive. And then these are 2 images of the nasal spray. And thank you.
Kennedy.
It's also related to the training we have and students.
Yeah. Feel like that's okay.
Hi, my name is Katie. My presentation name is Understanding Gun Safety and Gun Violence in America. I'm Kennedy. I go to Wasika High School, 14 years old. I've lived in Wasika for almost 2 years now. I originally lived on the east side of St. Paul for 6 years. Some sports I play are volleyball, softball, basketball, and football. What is gun violence? Gun violence is any act of violence that involves a gun, such as homicide, mass shootings, and accidental shootings. Why does gun safety and gun violence matter. Gun violence is the leading cause of death in the U.S., especially among the youth. It affects not just the victims, but families of the victims, neighborhoods of the victims, and schools, also leaving lasting trauma. Gun violence increases fear and trauma, especially in the youth. It also leads to long-term mental health issues, meaning it can often disrupt education and community trust. What has gun violence made us realize? Every life lost to gun violence is a story unfinished, a laugh silenced, and a dream defeated, and a mother who has now lost a child. Who taught us to be aware of gun violence? One of our favorite speakers was Princess Titus from Fight for Change. She talked a lot about being street smart and how to be aware of drugs and what not to do with guns. She also taught us how to use the Narcan and where to use it for. How can we take an action on gun violence? Support community violence prevention programs. Expand after-school programs to keep youth engaged and safe. Educate on gun safety throughout workshops and school programs. Encourage safe storage. Locked and loaded ammo storage separately. Share facts about guns, not myths. Organize neighborhood watch groups. How we want people to feel after our presentation. We want people to feel the weight of every life lost. We also want people to take action and not play with guns if you're not ready for the
We just wanted to show like two other presentations. They weren't able to do this today. But this one was on food systems. So as mentioned earlier, we had a week on food systems, trying to do things in the garden and outside, urban agriculture. And so this is a poster that Damon made on food systems, why they matter, different challenges, key components, types of food systems. Another example. And then we also had her sister, Dominique.
Yeah, they were twins.
Yeah. And Dominique did a wonderful presentation focusing on environmental injustice and connecting it to racial injustice. So these are just some of her takeaways. And again, I can't do these presentations justice, and these were their own words, but getting more at the sense of the connection between social and environmental factors and how it's all interconnected in the ways that we can combat climate change, the ways that we can move forward is really connected of neighborhoods, zip codes, our racial and economic and ethnicities, backgrounds. And so Dominic did a really great job explaining that. And we also talked about, instead of like the term food desert, moving towards food apartheid and thinking more of those systemic influences that impact how we access food and nutrition and quality of that food as well. And this was related to one of our speakers who was from the University of Minnesota, who talked about redlining and covenants. So Dominique also talked about redlining. That is going to impact where like trees are located and what parks are prioritized and where green spaces are located. And we spent a week talking about tree canopies and the urban heat island effect, which some of you mentioned in their presentations. But again, thinking more about why urban areas are hotter than rural areas or areas that have more greenery. Summary from Dominique of how racism impacts every part of our lives, including our environment and environmental issues, food inequality, tree equity, and the urban heat island effect, and many other parts of the improvement. So overall, just to conclude with some of the impacts, we had the interns do a survey on their overall takeaways, what stood out to them, what they liked, what they disliked, so to make sure we know how to move forward in a way that's going to only improve this program. And I'll have the youth quotes here since these are their reflections and experiences, but we had two questions. One was on defining environmental justice, and one was defining climate change, which in the beginning of the week, when we talked about it, some of the youth,
they understand that all of them understand that climate change is happening. And we know, like, on a science standpoint, youth have a lot of emotions around climate change. It's scary, it can be exhausting to talk about. And so a big part of the program was simply having them talk about it. You know, that's a huge part of moving forward with climate and environmental issues, is simply talking about it, especially with people your own age who can relate or have similar worries and emotions. So these are some of the reflections of what even is environmental justice and how they would define it. Some definitions were environmental justice. When people come together and talk about what is happening in their communities, like if there isn't enough trees or their environment doesn't have good air quality, and try to find solutions. Another person said environmental justice is doing what you believe is right for the climate and the community. Everyone has a right to a healthy environment, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, or ethnicity. Next, we also had the youth share their main skills that they learned. The most popular word was teamwork. So a lot of like teamwork and connecting with the youth, not just like on a school standpoint, which they're already used to, like projects and that kind of like in-class learning, but bringing out into the community and like talking to people who aren't teachers and youth. So the second big part after teamwork was public speaking. A lot of them said that they learned how to talk to strangers and do an elevator pitch, introduce themselves to people they've never met. And you know, when you're a teenager, that's scary. So being able to build those leadership, the teamwork, and the public speaking skills is something we saw with the reflections. And then the other two main parts, the professional growth, which relates to the other things I said, and then also environmental and climate learning, so learning more about the environment and specifically their own environment that they live in. These are some reflections. What's a new thing you tried this summer? I tried public speaking and it wasn't as bad as I thought. I helped plant a garden and learned how it worked, planting trees, networking, talking to strangers. And this summer I participated in activities that pushed me outside my comfort zone. At first it felt challenging, but I ended up learning new skills and gaining more confidence. The last question we'll share with you is a topic from this summer that you want to learn more about or engage with in the future. And that was another big goal we had, is just finding those areas that they're curious about and excited about and giving them people or resources or ideas of how they can explore that more. So for example, we had one day where I did a presentation on colleges. So I basically tried to think of every question I've had about college and like break it down and talk about scholarships and grants and the types of colleges, public versus private, what the FAFSA is and other things like that. So one youth said that they want to learn more about colleges and specifically the HBCUs or historically Black colleges and universities. Another said they want to learn more about different job opportunities. Big kudos to some of the interns who have already reached out to me asking if they can use me as a reference for a job application that they're working on now. I've had 3 so far. Yeah. So that was one of their assignments, was to have 3 references. And we are happy to be those references and are excited that some of them are already applying for the job they want for this next school year. Another said, I want to get a better understanding of climate change and ways to lessen its effects. A big one was food and agriculture. So food justice, food apartheid, and food systems were all mentioned folks. And another one that we didn't touch into, but we would love to maybe in the future, was renewable energy and learning more about how it can be used in everyday life, especially how solar and wind power can be applied in. Now I'll pass it to you if you have.
So this is an undertaking. We started to raise money for this program, I think January of last year, and we have to go late May. So July 7th is when we started, and we ran this program for 6 weeks. And now we're able to take a breath and just realize how impactful it was. It was definitely fun. They have already asked, when are we going to do it again? Are you going to turn it into an after school program, which is our goal eventually, is to have an after school in summer. But I feel like it has impacted them and it has given them some different ways of thinking for sure. So thank you for allowing us to present to you today. Thank you for the interns for doing an amazing job. You guys did an amazing job last week and then also this week. And I just want to give them another round of applause. That is all. And thank you for Sammy. She, like I said, she stuck with us for 6 weeks. in this crazy venture. I don't think she knew what she was getting into, but I'm glad she took there. And she just did an amazing job. So thank you very much.
And if you have any questions, we'll be here for them.
Thank you. And and thank you for your leadership, both Tanya and Sammy. And thank you for all the presenters who came in and made time today. And I really appreciate that you're willing to get about what you learned and experienced. And I just say any opportunities that you can take to do public speaking are good. They will help you out. And that you stepped up for this program is wonderful. And you care about our environment and the team building that takes place is very important too. So sounds like such a wonderful internship to talk through and experience things with pollinators and urban heat islands and gardening and tree equity and canopies and food justice and systems. That's all very, very important stuff. And the Narcan, gun safety, great internship experiences that were provided here. So great program. And I'll just ask board members any questions or oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you all for being here with us. Thank you all for your presentation. So I'm Brooke Cunningham. I'm the Commissioner of Public Health in the state. And I have to tell you all that while this was called environmental health or environmental, y'all were doing public health too. Y'all were doing public health. So we think about public health just like COVID and vaccine, or you might think about the doctor. You all were doing public health. And so I want to thank you all for planting those seeds. I hope you continue to think about this space or any other space. These tools are so important for whatever you all are seeing happening in your communities, for your future, for your family, for your friends, and for us as a state of Minnesota. So I am so glad to hear about this program. Thank you all for your work and your leadership to raise the money and make it happen, maybe turn it into an after-school program. It is so encouraging to me. So thank y'all.
Thank you.
Questions?
Well, I would just say thank you to Crystal from MDH came and presented with us and helped bring some of that public health perspective in. And, we really enjoyed it. And I think board members, if you have things that you would like to see from youth engagement in the future, let me know. We're going to be continuing to talk environmental justice or environmental initiative as we think about how this environmental justice and related program can continue to move forward. And it was short this year, so we kind of jumped in where we could. Hopefully as it expands, we can have maybe a student land board meeting or something like that. Lots of opportunities hopefully to pursue in the future. So if you have thoughts, let me know and I'll be talking to Mike and we'll keep moving.
Well, thank you. Oh,
I would just say, my other life, I teach environmental studies at the University of Minnesota Morrison. I'm happy to be a resource for your program if you need anything.
I will take you about it.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. Thank you. Thank you all again. Really appreciate it. Well, what else?
That was really interesting. I didn't notice when you were sitting there, and then I was looking at the names, like, you. I was like, hey, Sammy. That's awesome. That's really cool. I didn't.
All right, well.
That's great.
Ah, yes, she's been amazing, amazing.
Good to see you. You can come to these meetings.
Yeah, I'm on the-
Thanks.
Enjoying that.
Yeah, it's like a nice. I should have thought about program management. I learned like the grad school, just like education stuff. And with interns, I feel like I've become a lot better with facilitators. Yeah, high school is really like, they use to play all their emotions and like however they feel about that presentation. Show it's very helpful.
It's good sense. Great job. Good work.
All right. So last item on the agenda before the end public comment period is our work plan. And just at this point, we're going to have an update from our Executive Director Nuschler, and she'll present the work plan. And then we will offer a public comment period just for this as well. And say a voting item for us today.
Thank you.
We're ready.
Madam Chair, like I said, Priscilla and I really appreciated speaking to the interns. We got some really good feedback, one of which was too many slides sometimes. But hey, we're bureaucrats, we like slides. I apologize. You guys are going to get the really quick, lots of slides on the work plan right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about work planning resources and what we think we're going to do for the fiscal year that just started. So a reminder, right, we have our strategic plan, which sets our priorities. We have our work plan for the year, and then we have individual work plans that assign all of our stuff out to the staff. We do project plans as needed. A reminder, just for contextualize of our resources that we have. For fiscal 26-27, we did receive appropriations of just over $3 million. About $1.5 million each year, which represents an operating increase from prior years, but not specific project dollars. We have in the past sometimes gotten dollars for specific projects, but not this year. We're about 85% general fund funded, 15% environmental fund. Skip that one. People are resources at a glance to undertake our work. We have the executive director plus 9 staff positions. We have 8 full-time and 1 very part-time staff person. Throughout this presentation, I'm probably going to say we will do these things. It's really all the staff. I'm going to be very clear. They're the ones who drive the work forward and get the things done. And of course, we rely a lot on our collaborative work groups and capacity from our member agencies. Due to that heavy reliance on cross-agencies, teams, and partnerships, we do try to use everyone's time and talents wisely. So we have our tech reps, some of whom are here today, the groups we may form and draw on for specific projects, environmental review. We have, of course, the interagency pollinator team and work groups for projects as needed. We do try to keep in mind our project asks of our teams so that we aren't asking people for all the same people for help on different things at the same time. All right, so looking at what we are proposing to take on in fiscal 26, the way we've laid out the work plan is mostly on project-specific work. We try to look at those discrete projects, not necessarily putting a lot of sort of ongoing projects on the list. A reminder as you look at the list, because I know there seems like a lot of things on there in that table, every project, every line on the list isn't necessarily the same amount of work. And every project isn't necessarily one that's intended to be completed within 1 year. In the work plan, we also tried to delineate the level of support needed. In the packet, we use the terms kind of low, medium, high. And in general, the work that has a low need for cross-agency support is work that we're moving forward. We will keep folks informed, but in general, EQB staff are working on it. Medium work, we're moving forward, but we might need review, higher level input from some or all of our interagency partners. And then a high need for cross-agency support is perhaps a really in-depth review or up to really specific work products that we need. You know, the water report was a high need because we parceled out pieces and said, can you guys write this part? So there certainly will be work where the cross-agency needs might be higher for one or more agencies than others, such as with the energy rulemaking, high involvement from PUC, lower to medium involvement from other agencies that have experience with environmental review. So just a little context there, because I know some of you have said, this looks like a really long work plan, and have some concerns about the cross-agency work. In the packet, it's laid out by kind of work area, but I am going to talk through it today in terms of our strategic plan outcomes. So starting with our outcome 1 about engagement and meaningful conversations. Part of our focus for fiscal 26 is really going to be it's supposed to be developing and improving relationships and ongoing communication with external partners and stakeholders, along with developing systems and tools to support continuity in relationships. So some communication materials that will help us share our story, the relationship development. And in this area, we also want to do some strategic evaluation of the Environmental Congress that we did last year and figure out the role, purpose, and direction for that moving forward. And we also want to make sure we have ability to maintain connections with folks that are interested in our work. The other strategies for this outcome really focus on youth engagement, the Roots for the Future program that you just heard about, and continuing with that. And then also looking at ways to improve board agenda and outcome sharing and doing more highlighting about what we're talking about, what's on our minds, and what our outcomes are. In this area, we also have a strategy on tribal coordination, which we're implementing primarily through our environmental review work. Our second area of outcome is general policy and program development. A lot of this work relates to pollinators and biodiversity. So Rebecca's leading the ongoing collaboration of the Interagency Pollinator Protection Team around implementation of the Pollinator Action Framework, identifying areas of synergy and collaboration, and sharing progress. One of the big additions in this area proposed for fiscal 26 is additional engagement, the facilitation of peer-to-peer conversations and webinars that she is planning on, so folks can talk to their peers about how to support pollinators. So we're looking at different webinars, local governments, farmers, tribal communities, things like that. The three big projects around climate and water work is part of this area. The wrapping up the Groundwater Policy Report has been part of our work for this fiscal year. And I think also one of the through lines that we hear is how we can best serve as a place to gather, compile, share, and discuss the data and information that tells the story. So this year, I have been and I'm continuing to participate in the revision of the Climate Action Framework with a focus on how we might report progress and continued likely discussion about whether EQB is an appropriate venue for reporting progress over the long term. And then we're also participating in the Climate Subcabinet focus on developing efficient and effective regulatory environment for sustainable aviation fuel. Obviously, then a lot of our work is around environmental review and our strategies to meet the outcome of maintaining the environmental review program. In terms of supporting RGUs and proposers, what we're really focusing on this year and have been is technical assistance and training. So continuing to provide training on the climate calculator. We did an environmental review 101 in fiscal 25. We'll be doing what we might call enhanced basics for environmental review, digging more in depth into some specific topics. We have some specific projects to update some of our guidance documents. I think you heard, Aris heard in June from Jesse about updating the petition guidance for the public. That's complete, and he'll be moving on to information for RGUs on how to evaluate a petition. And we've also identified the need for guidance updates to AUARs. And I know we've already heard that word a lot today and talked about that. Our guidance documents on those are from 2008 and 2015. And we'll really be working our main goal right now is just to update them, make sure that they still are in line with the rules, and we're not planning big changes at this time, but we're just getting the baseline updated, and then we could consider future changes if needed. And then Kayla is working on guidance and best practices to support RGUs in effectively recognizing tribal resources. And then basically, as we are updating all of our guidance, we're trying to make it more accessible and easier to update and move away from PDFs and just make it easier for people to read. And as part of that, we have realized that our EAW form is not accessible, like for screen readers, and it's not fillable, and it needs modernization. So we do plan this year to just modernize the form and make it accessible, and maybe streamline a few places for understanding. We're not talking about substantive content changes, literally just cleaning up the form. So we will have more to share about that in the future. And then we're continuing to track MPCA's air focused cumulative impacts rulemaking. There has been discussion about a pilot project on cumulative impacts and environmental review that we thought might happen this fall, but is likely to happen later in the fiscal year, but that is still in our mind. We're continuing to do the tools and guidance on climate, including the ongoing training, updating the guidance to reflect the existence of the calculator, and then due to some changes in the budget, we are going to be able to expand the calculator to include some of the additional needs that we've heard from stakeholders, quantitative mitigation, improving some of the land use emission factors, and doing some minor updates to operation and construction. So staff is working with the contractor to make those additions that we and our many of our partners would like to add to that. So that's something we weren't expecting to be able to do, but are happy to be able to add. We're also, continuing to work to improve data collection. We got a lot done in this last year. In fiscal 25, we really knocked out a bunch of our data projects, including the data dashboard, doing some more surveys around how things are going, and improved internal data tracking. We'll be continuing those, and then want to do some improved performance tracking focused around environmental benefits from EISs and EAWs. So this will be primarily, right now, the way we're thinking of it, like an internal project where we will look at the documents that are submitted to us, but we're still figuring out exactly how this is going to work. But it is, like I said, we want to look into how we can learn more about what's included in the EAWs. The last part here in environmental review, and this is where a lot of our more resource intensive work will be, is in this strategy to evaluate and develop updates to support the program effectiveness and clarity in implementation. So I think both rulemaking and other changes. So we do have 3 legislatively mandated rules on our plate for fiscal 26, the energy infrastructure rule that Colleen spoke about, the gas production mandatory category that you've heard a little bit about. And then I think I've mentioned the legislature has directed us to make changes to scoping procedures for mandatory EISs. We'll be doing that this year as well. There's a very small rulemaking there. And then, we would like to do what's called a housekeeping rule, which is just a cleanup, going through finding those things that have gotten outdated. We have places that say, look at subparts 1 through 27, but the rule now has 35 subparts. So there's things like that that are helpful to clean up. I don't think we would move this one very far this year, but we might want to do kind of that first request that you do where you say, hey, we're thinking about this. What things do you all, public who use these rules, think we should clean up? And then we are planning to run the continuous improvement process this year. We asked for ideas from the public in calendar year 2023. We were going to do that every 2 years. I think we agreed last year that was too frequent. We didn't have enough time to make progress. So we want to move to a 4-year process, but I'm also interested in aligning the process with the internal deadlines for budget and policy ideas to go through the legislature. So probably this spring, we would be looking at that continuous improvement process. That is what is on the proposed work plan. And then the big addition is there's longstanding interest in moving forward with methods to consider health impacts in environmental review. Given the time since the board last discussed this issue, what we're thinking, and probably for the second half of the fiscal year, is for the staff to document and present the history of how EQB has considered this issue, to ground all of us in the issue, and then working with the other agencies, particularly we've spoken with our tech reps from the Department of Health, but also with others, to develop and evaluate like what potential options would there be to move forward on some way of considering health impacts and environmental review. So then that would that evaluation would identify potential future projects. So we're not committing to anything specific at this point. There's likely to be a lot of options to do this, and we probably need to take some incremental steps. So basically for this year, we would recap where we've been, some range of options for moving forward, and then assuming that whatever you choose for moving forward would happen in the next fiscal year. Just to note that these items in environmental review continue to support the continuous improvement ideas that people had for us around climate, cumulative impacts, data management, guidance, and training, and that health impacts has been mentioned to us frequently by stakeholders. Then in our fourth outcome around equity, I think would still like to consider working with our member agencies to understand disproportionate impacts and how that could, what tools and actions they have. I think the context of that conversation has likely changed in the last couple of years. So it's something to think about. We are doing strategy 2, providing that information on equity. And then this is another place where the conversations around cumulative impacts are happening, and we're continuing to track that as MPCA goes through their rulemaking this year, and then see where that might lead us in the future. The last big thing kind of relating to board operations is a records management project. In 2018 or 19, the board directed the staff to do a records retention schedule. That was done. We don't really have a permanent electronic storage system, however, for our files, and we're going to work with MPCA to use their databases and actually develop a filing structure and system. It's kind of one of our not strategic, but very management important projects. Just briefly in the packet, we did try to put some timelines for the project. We are trying to be mindful of when we need interagency support and also when we need public input, so that, again, we're not asking all the same people for thoughts and work on different things at the same time. They are always subject to change, but they are in your packet and put up here as well. Boy, those are not easy to see on the slide, but we have the ones that are sort of grayed out are the rulemaking timelines, where the rulemaking takes a long time, but there will be some specific smaller areas where we will be asking our member agency staff for help and input, and then kind of some of the guidance happens earlier in the fiscal year, and then some of the other things later in the fiscal year. So trying to keep some of those straight. And then we tried to lay out as well the public input timeline. So we think the energy rulemaking one will be this fall. And then, the gas production one's probably not going to happen until this spring. The continuous improvement process is probably winter to spring. And then the other 2 rulemakings kind of slot in there. These really might change, but it just shows that we are trying to be mindful about how we ask for engagement. And that is a very fast run through of the proposed work plan. So it hasn't changed a lot from last year. A lot of our work is ongoing. Big additions being that consideration of health and environmental review, the 1 additional rulemaking from the legislature, kind of the pollinator peer-to-peer webinars and engagement in that area, and some of our engagement focus being kind of the new things for this year.
Well, thank you. You did get through that very quickly, and appreciate that. So at this time, we'll take any questions or comments from board members on the board plan.
So I'm really pleased to see that we're going to review the discussion around the health impacts. I think that is critical. I understand there's been, some debate about the role of that in this space, but I think that's critical and timely for us to get back to that. So I'm glad to see that in our work plan. The other thing that I would note to the latter slide on equity considerations, clearly there are disparate impacts in terms of the risks, in terms of environmental change, folks' ability and communities' ability to mitigate and respond and protect themselves, that are structured in patterned ways. We're going to have tighter budgets, going forth, particularly in the short term. And I really need to think, I hope that we continue, despite what is the overarching current climate, to really show up with the values of Minnesota and continue to make sure we're really considering the most vulnerable Minnesotans as we think about the environmental impact. So I think that's critically important for us to continue to lead on. and to be strategic on. So I just wanted to.
I'll just note too on the health and environmental review, I'll echo, I think this is very important. We've heard a lot about it. I think there has been challenges in understanding what our role is as EQB, understanding like our agency's role in that. And I appreciate that you're thinking about work to get us all grounded and what that could look like. And I think that's important. There's some confusion question about what that could look like. It's a newer area to focus on. Any other comments or questions? Board Member Nelson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one. I'm a bit concerned about having the continuous improvement public comment again. I seem to recall that the list we previously generated was quite extensive, and every time you ask for public improvement or other ideas, you're also creating an expectation that you're going to get to those fairly soon or not. And it seems to me we still have quite a few on there, and though that existing list could be used to inform the budgetary process as well, as the executive director suggested that was the need. So that's my comment.
Board Member Nelson.
Can I just?
Oh.
I just wanted to, on behalf of the PCA, sort of echo what Board Member Nelson said. I think we feel the same way. That the continuous improvement list that's there is something that the public is probably expecting us to make some progress on, and fighting off a whole nother new continuous improvement process. We haven't completed everything, or we haven't decided to take some of the things on the old list off so that there's capacity. We'd like to just echo that concern about just the capacity of the team to finish off what has been promised, so air quotes as well as looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. You want to share your thoughts on that?
Sure, but Madam Chair, I appreciate those. I don't know that the whole list is a promised list. I think one of the things that we would like to do this time, assuming if we do move forward with the continuous improvement, which if the board doesn't want to, we can make that, we can change that, is to help to try to provide a little more guidance, because I think we look at some of the feedback that we got and it's a little bit difficult to fully conceptualize. And so if we do move forward with it, one of the things we've been talking about is how do we set it up to have more useful feedback. So that was something that we were planning to talk to you all about, as we can talk about how we want to move it, how we would frame it, how it would move forward, to help with that.
I look forward to those discussions on that, and going out again can offer the opportunity to help us prioritize some of the items that we had on the previous go around as well. But I think having it framed in ways that are problems that we're trying to solve, and looking for what information is out there already can kind of help us hone in on some themes to prioritize. And appreciate that you are Catherine are looking to how we could do things a little bit differently for the next go around and work on that list. Any other comments or questions from board members? If there are no other comments from board members, we will go to a public comment on the work plans. This is specific for the work plan. Is there anyone who is here today to comment on the work plan before we get the roll comment? We're online. Online, anyone? No? Okay. All right. And with that, again, board, thank you for your comments on that. Good. I ask if there is a motion which is in your, for the resolution in your packet, a motion to adopt that resolution.
So moved.
Mr. Holman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And any discussion on the motion to approve the resolution. Approving work.
It felt a little ominous, Gerald.
Not hearing any. Why don't we go ahead and, Board Member Nelson's icon flash, maybe that. Board Member Nelson, were you trying to chime in?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, I think we can go ahead and do the roll call vote for the resolution.
Commissioner Arnold, not with us. Board Member Bakken.
Support.
Board Member Becker-Kemper.
Yes.
Board Member Brands.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Chair Daubenberger.
Yes.
Commissioner Groundball. No. Board Member Hintz. Chair Holman.
Aye.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Yes.
Commissioner Kessler. Board Member Martin. Commissioner Verilek. Board Member Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Board Member Smith.
Aye.
And Commissioner Stromet is not with us, so that is 10. And 7 not present.
So the resolution passed and have approved of the work plan. Thanks to all for the work on the work plan for this next year. Looking forward to the work of this. So with that, that brings us to one of the last items, which is the final public comment period. So this is public comment on, could be anything you heard today, but also anything that outside of the specific items too. So do we have anyone in the room?
I know Ms. Overlook would like to speak about it anyway.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for sticking with us.
Go ahead, and then we'll take online. So if you're online, you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function or put in the chat that you'd like to make a comment. So go ahead.
Yeah, Carol Overland again. I want to comment on the AUAR data center issue. I'm kind of surprised to learn that this is sort of just coming up now. I first learned about this at the end of 2023 when Northfield had an AUAR. Excel had proposed something, and I'm dealing with Excel constantly, and I got my little red flags up, and so I paid attention. Since that time, I've learned of Cannon Falls, Faribault, Farmington, Hampton, Lakeville, North Mankato, Northfield, Pine Island, all are having these data centers proposed, and I'm sure there are many more. Now, my basic theory is a lot of them won't be built. It's sort of like wind projects, solar projects, many of them won't be built, but this is a very real issue. And most of these AUARs that I'm seeing are cut and paste. And I did put my comments into the Cannon Falls one. I learned about that through an indivisible one. That's the only one I've been really invested in. And I'm not representing any client. This is just on my own as an individual. But I'm appalled at what's going on because what's happening is they are saying it's an AUAR, but the information is not given out and we're expected to make comment. Well, we're invited to make comments, but how do you make comments when you don't know what's going on? And just recently, MCEA did file 2 lawsuits, Lakeville and North Mankato. These lay it all out beautifully. I mean, I'm not generally impressed with MCEA. I have a lot of issues with them, but they did such a good job on this. It's amazing. The issues they brought up very shortly were inadequate project description, inadequate environmental review because of water impacts, energy impacts, air quality impacts, noise and light, inadequate mitigation plan. I mean, how can you mitigate anything if you don't know what it is? And cumulative impacts. When you have all these different AUAR, which are really data centers proposed, sucking a lot of water out, putting out a lot of emissions, sucking a lot of energy in, where are cumulative impacts dealt with? And the main reason I believe that they're doing this is to avoid an EIS. And that's a big problem. And you've got all of these happening right now. And you folks are the environmental review regulators. But yet these are all in the process, so it's going to happen. I mean, what I wish that you could have MCEA suing each and every single one of these, but what a waste of resources, and well, why do we have to go through that? But how is this going to be stopped? How will this practice be straightened out? This is like urgent because this is happening right now. You know, like in Cannon Falls, there was no information about it. People were yapping about, oh, we don't know, we have to find out. Nobody did a data practices act request. Okay, fine. I did a data practices act request. I got the information like 2 days before the comments were due. And what I got was big plans from the data center developer. Duh. And so, I mean, we're talking like actual plans, and I cut and pasted some of them. They were going to the city of Cannon Falls, November 12th, 2024, with laid out very specific plans. This is what they plan to do. Did they tell anyone about it? Did they make this public? No. So you're the Environmental Quality Board, you know, and I would hope that you as a board could take some action here to straighten this out. Or otherwise, we're going to end up having to sue everybody. I don't have the resources to do it. Even one, you know, Cannon Falls, which I know a lot about. But how is this going to happen other than suing every single one of these when it's a systemic problem with the AUARs? And when I see AUAR guidance on the work plan, there really needs to be guidance about what the AUAR process is for, how it should be used, and more specifically, how it shouldn't be used. It's a huge problem, and it's going to affect Minnesota immensely. I mean, when you look at the water proposed to be used, I know a lot about noise because I worked on wind noise. I've got the only 2 settlements in Minnesota for violating the MPCA's rules, noise rules. After that, Commerce went in behind closed doors and changed their guidance and are allowing bogus inputs for the modeling. Anyway, so noise is going to be a huge issue, and they're building these things right up against residences, right up against subdivision fence lines. It's obscene, and this is happening right now. And you all need to know about this. To review the MCEA lawsuits, all you have to do is go to legalectric.org, and that's all in your packet. It's the second one down. You can look at those. Please read those. They do a really good job of laying it all out. And this is something you really need to know about.
Thank you for that comment, Mrs. Overland. Ms. Overland, I appreciate it, and for providing the information to us. We will take this under consideration.
I sure hope so.
Now I will see if there are any other commenters or how about online? All right, well, that will conclude the public comment. And so, again, appreciate the comments today that were provided. And with that, let's see, reach into the agenda. Is there any further business? Not hearing or seeing anything. With that, then the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for spending the extra time today, too. Thank you.
Nope. Oh, I was thinking